Hey everyone, Flo from After Lens here, and this is a Blackmagic URSA 17K 65. So recently I had the amazing opportunity to shoot a project in Iceland for a week with this camera, and in this video I want to share with you my experience. That project was actually part of the launch of this camera, and I'm so glad to finally be able to talk about it. I also got to keep this camera for a few days after the shoot, so I managed to shoot my own things as well, and I'll be sure to share this later on. So this is not a full in-depth review, but more my thoughts and initial impressions after using the camera for a couple of weeks. And as always, be sure to subscribe as I will share a lot more content with and around this camera, including more footage, reviews, and comparison videos. Now let's get into it. So first of all, of course, I want to talk about the project itself and how it happened. I'm assuming a lot of you have seen the footage by now. If you haven't, feel free to check out Blackmagic's website or YouTube channel. And of course, I don't have the camera with me anymore today. I had to give it back. I wish I could have kept it longer, but I don't think there are that many out yet in the world. Also, just to mention, I think the one that we used in Iceland was a prototype, or at least a beta version, so things might be slightly different when it's actually out for real. So as you know, I've been a Blackmagic shooter for nearly 12 years now. I've started with the OG Pocket, and since then I've pretty much used or owned every single one of the cameras. And if you don't know who I am a French-Australian filmmaker based in French Alps, and I specialize in short documentaries, but I also do a lot of outdoor content, a lot of licensing and travel content as well. And here on YouTube, I share my experience in BTS, and I also do gear reviews and pretty much everything filmmaking related. So for the past 6 years or so, I've been able to work with Blackmagic closely, either via YouTube or doing interviews or things like that, but I was never part of an official promotional piece before. So I can't remember exactly how or why it happened, but essentially a few months ago, I got to the point when we were discussing the potential projects for the upcoming 17K camera. And Iceland was my top choice for a camera like this. Fast forward to February and it was actually happening. We spent 5 days in Iceland total, and the team was made up of 4 people including myself, and the creative director of Blackmagic was actually there as well on site. I was of course a DP on the job. Then I chose my friend Alex as a camera operator for the run and 2 shots as well as for general assisting. My friend Thomas was also there to do, again, assisting, but also take the BTS content, especially the video, because we needed some. And for the talent, we chose Amanda. I actually knew Amanda for a few years before that, but we never got to work together. So this was the perfect opportunity, and she was great for the role. It was a very small team, considering the conditions and the amount of gear that we had as well, and I'm super proud of what we've achieved, especially in that short space of time. The project itself was to capture the raw and unique beauty of Iceland and have a talent exploring and experiencing this place to give it scale and context. And to be honest with you, filming 65mm in Iceland is, for me, pretty much a dream project. It was a very intense shoot, especially due to the weather conditions. We had extreme winds. We had winds above 100 kilometers an hour. And we also had some snow, and we got wet a little bit. And it was of course quite cold too. It was also winter when we were there, so the days were quite short. We didn't have as much daylight, so we had to take that into consideration when we were kind of like planning the routes and the shots. We also covered a lot of distance, and we had quite a lot of gear, as you can imagine. In terms of lenses, we used the Tokina Vista Primes. We had a 29, a 35, a 50, an 85 and a 135mm. And we also had a 35p, and that had a bit more character. These lenses were great to use, and they were also quite sharp, which suited that project. When it comes to batteries, we use Core SWX ones. We had the Helix Max, and we used 2 150s and 2 98s, all B mount. Funny anecdote, I actually went to Iceland 10 years ago for the first time with the OG Pocket, and then went back 5 years ago with a 6K Pro. So being there this time again with a 65mm was quite special for me on a personal level. I feel very privileged and honored to have had this incredible opportunity, and to be able to get my hands on the camera before its global release, to be able to shoot with it properly on an actual project. And of course, I'll share more footage on the channel ASAP. I've actually shot quite a bit here in the French Alps, but today I really wanted to focus on Iceland because that was the core of the project and the main part of it. And also, just to be completely honest with you, Blackmagic did not ask me to make this video. I decided to make it because I thought that it would be interesting and helpful, as it is not a camera that you can have easy access to, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions about it. I'm also very curious to know what you guys think about this cam, so I'm happy for this video to become some sort of a forum or discussion, so make sure to leave your comments below. The URSA CINE 17K is an absolute beast. It's a proper cinema camera and pretty much the flagship model for Blackmagic. From the outside, you have a camera that looks very similar to the previous URSA lineup, just larger and heavier. And you have all the connections that you can pretty much think of. You've got SDI, Ethernet, XLR, you also have 2 screens, a B-mount plate, and you have 4 different options when it comes to mounts. And you also have an internal 8TB module, which is very handy and fast. I won't mention all the specs and features because there's a lot, but you can check that out on Blackmagic's website. But arguably, it is the inside that is the craziest part. This camera has a 17K 65mm RGBW sensor. Open gate, this means it is 17:520 but 80:40. This is pretty insane. And this gives you a 2.2:1 aspect ratio. And you can also shoot in 8K or in 4K without a crop. I won't go through them, but there are actually so many different combinations of resolutions, aspect ratios, and compressions as well. And this camera has 16 stops of dynamic range. And it also has an OLPF. On top of that, you have a lot of streaming options and capabilities, as well as cloud storage. And in terms of frame rates, of course, you've got a lot of different options, but to me, the two that stand out really are Open Gate 17K at 60 FPS and 8K at 100 FPS. And finally, it comes in a Pelican case with a bunch of accessories as well. Again, feel free to check out Blackmagic's website for all the info. First of all, from a design and outside point of view. This is a pretty large camera. Obviously, this is based on my own experience. As I just said before, I'm used to the Pixis or the pocket shape being rigged up. Even though I've shot with the URSA Mini Pro 12K before, I've owned the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K, this is different. And of course, it has to be based on the features and the sensor that's inside. But that being said, it didn't feel that much different from other Blackmagic cameras in many ways. And if you are a Blackmagic shooter already, if you've got experience with their cameras, you'll be very familiar with it. It was also very comfortable to hold and shoot handheld as well. When we were in Iceland, we used it on sticks a lot because of the high winds, but we also used a Ronin 2 for a few shots, and I actually used the camera quite a fair bit handheld. I think our setup was about 10 kilos. Obviously, I had a couple of assistants when we were in Iceland, but this is definitely a camera that you can use on your own as a solo shooter, despite how powerful it is. And I've done that when I was back in France here on my own with a camera. I even used it with a vintage lens on it and nothing else, just a camera, the lens and the top handle. It was actually fine, and I didn't even use an easy rig, and I was shooting for about a couple of hours. And I can't wait to share more footage of that with you. So essentially it still behaves like a Blackmagic camera, and this is a good thing, especially for a 65mm large format camera. The menus are also super simple. Again, it's pretty much the same as you would find on the URSA or the Pixis or the Pocket line. Super easy to use despite, again, how powerful it is and despite all the options and combinations that you can have. So again, it feels no different than using any other Blackmagic cameras. And when I got the camera for the first time, when I shot with it for the first time, it literally took me like minutes or seconds to get used to it. One of the main differences with the other cameras from the Blackmagic lineup, aside from the 12K LF, is the assist screen on the side. It was very helpful for myself, of course, but more importantly for the team as well. And I also used the Pixis monitor and the EVF, and I chose basically the combo that worked best for that shot or location. It was actually really good to have the options. And now I want to talk, of course, about the image. In terms of resolution, we shot most of the content in 17K open gate and 8K 100. It was such a great experience to be able to capture Iceland in 65mm. This was my first time filming large format video. I've shot in Iceland many times before, but this time using that camera and that sensor was the closest to the real thing, if that makes sense. I don't think it's just about the resolution, but it's also about the depth and the feeling that I got when I was filming and seeing the footage. And with a sensor like that, you get pretty much the best of whatever you put in front of it. The Tokinas were really great to use and I was very happy with the images and look. And they were quite sharp, even wide open. I did use other lenses when I was back home because again, I had to send the Tokinas back. I wish I could have kept them, but I used the camera with more affordable kind of standard stills lenses and vintage ones as well. We also shot this entire project with natural lights, aside from a few scenes indoor at the hotel that had practicals. And as you know, this is the way I like to shoot. I love to use natural light, whether I'm like indoors or outdoors, because I like to document places the way that they are and to basically translate the emotions or the feeling that I had while I was there. Now I want to talk about dynamic range. I've been used to the 13 stops on the Pixies, the 6K full frame and pretty much all the other pocket lineup. Having 16 stops on a 17K is a massive jump. And even when we were facing very harsh lights, I don't remember the camera clipping, or at least not easily. And we also shot in pretty high contrast areas with a lot of like dark shadows and very bright highlights, and it was able to retain a lot of detail and information. I definitely want 16 stops on my next camera. This is not a need, it's more a want because it makes things easier, especially for documentary and outdoor work. It's always hard to describe images, but there is definitely something special about that sensor. Like I said, I've been shooting with BLACKMAGIC cameras for 12 years. I use them pretty much every week. That sensor is different. I've always been impressed by the footage that I was able to get with the URSA Mini Pro 12K a few years ago. And for the past year and a half, I've been using the 6K full frame sensor on the Pixies and the 6K camera, which I love. But this new 17K 65mm sensor is a step above, or many steps above. And the resolution plays an important part in it. Obviously, you've got so much detail. You can crop in, you can reframe, so it gives you flexibility. But I think to me, it's really that depth, that look that creates a unique image. And of course, being a BLACKMAGIC camera, you've got their beautiful color science as well. Now I want to talk about media, because I think this is something that people will be interested about. Obviously, with that type of resolution and codecs and frame rates, the files are huge, but the 8TB module is actually quite easy and very, very fast to use. I've used it when I was back home as well, and I just plugged the camera via the Ethernet port. It was actually surprisingly easy, simple, and very, very fast. I think for memory in Iceland we shot roughly between 3 and 4 tera worth of footage, which seems like a lot, but I think it's pretty good considering the amount that we shot and also the resolution, the codecs, and the frame rates. I also like the fact that it's in the camera. You don't really have to think about bringing media or formatting even, because you've got so much room. When it comes to power and battery life, you did quite well as well, especially considering the resolution, the frame rates, but also the conditions that we were in. It was quite cold. Core SWX were actually kind enough to send us 4 batteries and a charger for the shoot. And even though we shot quite a bit each day and the days were pretty long, we had enough for every single day with the 4 batteries. I think from memory we got about an hour and a half from the 150 and roughly an hour from the 98s. Overall, I think Iceland was a real test. I won't go too much into the details, but we've put the camera through quite a lot and definitely through its paces, and Iceland was not kind to it, but it did very well. Personally, I would love to be able to use this camera again and shoot in different parts of the world and use that resolution, that sensor, to really be able to capture places and make the viewer feel like they were there. I've been shooting 3x2 a lot recently, open gate on the Pixies and the 6K full frame, but I really think that the wider aspect ratio that you get shooting open gate on the 17K really suits Iceland. If I had to mention one thing after my experience, would be probably the lack of NDs, and it's not a fault to the camera obviously, because there's definitely a reason for that. Maybe it's the size of the sensor, the body, and I think when you use a camera like that, you are going to use a matte box because you're going to use larger lenses, of course. But I think for me, for my type of work, doing documentary work, outdoor work, it's something that I always like to have, because it gives you a bit more of a safety net, a bit more flexibility. And when you have extremely high winds, not having a matte box sometimes is better. But yeah, this is just something that I would mention because I actually thought you had NDs after looking at the specs of the 12K. and watching reviews and things like that. So yeah, but that didn't stop anything. And obviously when I was back home, I used a VND because I had normal sized lenses. And in Iceland, I had 2 assistants with me, so we were all able to swap lenses and to work around that very easily. I think this camera is very exciting for a few reasons. First of all, because it brings 65mm large format or extreme resolution to more people and not just Hollywood projects. What I'm trying to say is I think this camera is accessible for regular filmmaking and not just high-end. From a price point, of course, but also from a user and operating point of view. And I'm not saying this is a cheap camera or an easy to buy camera, but for what it can do, what it offers for that price tag, it's pretty insane value. And I also love tech and cameras in general, so what you're able to get in terms of the crazy resolutions, the dynamic range it can offer, the high frame rates, this is a camera that makes me want to use it and try new things. Like I said before, I just want to go around the world now and capture everything in large format. So after using this camera for about 2.5 weeks now, I'm very impressed by it. It actually took me a while to go back and get adjusted to my 6K cameras. This is hands down the craziest camera I've ever used. There's essentially no limits to what you can do with this thing. The image is insane and beautiful and massive, and with all the different options that you get, it makes for a very powerful camera that at the same time is super easy to use and operate. I can see this camera being very useful for narrative work, of course, but also for documentary work, licensing content, sport, wildlife, pretty much anything. And like I said, I don't think this is just for massive Hollywood productions. Again, I really want to thank BLACKMAGIC for the incredible opportunity. This was such a special project on so many levels. Iceland was one of the best projects I've ever been a part of. I was in one of my favorite countries. I was there with people that I care about, and I was there to do exactly what I love, and this is the best part of it. That's it for me for today, guys. Hopefully this was interesting and helpful to you. As I said before, don't forget to subscribe as I will share a lot more content with and about the 17K, including more footage, a review and comparison videos. Let me know if you've got any more questions. I'm pretty sure that some of you do, and I'll try my best to answer them in the comments or in a future video. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Also, feel free to check out my 2 ebooks, Freelance Documentary Filmmaking and Travel Cinematography, where you can find a streamlined but comprehensive overview from pre-production all the way to marketing, built on years of my own experience shooting short documentaries and travel videos around the world. And if you are interested, I'm also doing filmmaking mentoring sessions when you can ask me anything about a wide variety of topics.